Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and we are here to talk. Yes, what is that below me? Hour-long, daily tabletop RPG content. Yes, this is the correct place for you. If you are stuck at home and bored, and you would like to get your fix of tabletop RPG content, please stick around. Maybe give a like, share, subscribe, and whatnot. And of course, as you can see, off to my side, this show is also simulcast over on Twitch and Discord. Now, it would behoove me, since we happen to be talking about things on a weekly basis, to talk about the thing that is sweeping the world, a pandemic. But the purpose of this show is to not do such a thing. For this is the place to have take your mind off of things, if just for a moment. No, those problems will not go away, but we will be here to give you a distraction, and maybe, just maybe, when you return to reality, you may have a new perspective. Or maybe you just want to turn it on because you're trying. It's hard for you to fall asleep. Whatever. But anyway, guys, good to see you all. Please participate in the Twitch, YouTube, or Discord chat. If you go over to the Discord server that is for this channel, we are having a chat down there, and you can also listen in audio down there in the boiler room. So this week, I thought we would talk about, from the thumbnail, if you've seen it, Knights. Yeah. Knights, starting with the K. The idea of, on this Monster Monday, of an organized group of individuals, an organization recognized in large part by a society, who are dedicated to one service. So I thought we would talk about this all week, and of course it absolutely fits in on a Monster Monday. Yeah, Deadman's like, oh, Dragon Knights. Thank you, Harry. You're always there, and thank you very much for the cup of coffee as always. Thank you so much. Yes, Harry, the only individual that I know of that is a meth as well as I am. For those who don't know, meth refers to not the drug-addled individual, but the Methuselah, those who exist for long periods of time in the RPG community. So I really appreciate that, Harry. Thank you so much, by the way. Dropping in the super chat, that's awesome. I've already asked, World of Darkness Hunters the Vigil? It depends on how. Let's break this down a little bit, okay? So I thought we would talk about knights because, especially in our fantasy gaming, we tend to talk around them, but not necessarily about them. And despite the fact that a lot of fantasy art and fantasy tropes are based around the cinematic version of what we consider to be knights and knighthood and such. So the idea here is that they're usually, and I'm being extremely stereotypical here, they're usually armed and armored up, and well trained, often mounted and in service of any combination of divinity, a strict code of honor, individuals that are in power, whether they are nobles or there is some kind of governmental agency, or they follow the dictates of some form of authority in the land. No. I don't want to go too far with that. YouTube will ping me. But all right there. Diastatic Power, I guess your name is. Well, hello there as well. Thank you very much for joining in. So in this particular In this particular concept, we can stretch the idea of like oaths and power and things, but oftentimes because they are armed and armored, that's really a an indicator that the knights are they have a lot of resources behind them, right? And many times they are given a elevated position of status, or they are there's some kind of not just ranking, but within the community itself that people are giving. They give them lots of honor. They have certain particular privileges. I suppose if you wanted to make this more modern and or futuristic, you could very well relate this and make this far more military or law enforcement in the way it's depicted. Although even in science fiction, an organization like the Jedi from Star Wars would be an example of a type of organization that has such a thing. Ivor says, I got knights in my game. They ride steam bikes. Yeah. Wear long capes and I'm is that shotguns, like judges from Dread. Yeah, but not so law crazy. But they are paladins, and there is no limit to the amount of information you can find about the idea of real knights and real paladins and people, Templars and that kind of thing, and the fact that our cinematic version of them doesn't necessarily match the reality of them. So how law-abiding they are, how devoted they are to their chosen cause, how effective they were, it remains to be seen. Harry says, yeah, gave mine as a part of nobility as well as a landholder. Yeah, yeah, the how someone becomes a knight, whether it's like a judge from Judge Dredd, and they're like, oh, almost obsessively devoted to a particular cause, or whether it's given to individuals despite their capabilities of being a knight or not, especially in a world where they are whether it's based on wealth or land or last names, family name, or given to individuals because of, say, duty and service in wartime or something like that. Yeah, Ivor. First rule of making a paladin: you are lawful good, not lawful idiot. And yeah, I know we're not going to go down the alignment argument for path because people just get triggered off of that kind of thing. But I will say that public opinion and private disposition might be two different things, right? Everyone may assume or think of them as a symbol of law and goodness and justice and order, although privately or for those who experience them firsthand, such may not be the case, and that may even change based on soldier to soldier, right, knight to knight, depending on the kind of vices they have, how brutal they are, and how many witnesses there are as well. So using them, this is Monster Monday, and using them in your game doesn't necessarily mean you have to create them in a stereotypical manner. The player characters and the people in the world may consider them, they may have a preconceived notion, they may consider them to be stereotypical, but the individuals themselves do not need to be. And such as one of the Facebook groups that I'm really active in, and the individuals are also content creators, are the Absolute Tabletop guys. They are made up of How to Be a Better Game Master, A Fistful of Dice, and Tabletop Terrors. They're very prolific on YouTube, but they're also content creators, and one of their contents that they created was the Convocation. They are basically an order of devotees that ride on the back of griffins. And this idea that you can take some parts and get rid of other parts is pretty common as well in tabletop gaming, meaning that there is the old school idea that paladins must be lawful good versus the fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons version, in which they take an oath of service, and that seems to be the commonality, that there's an oath of service, either to an ideal, especially to each other, and this ideal is far bigger than themselves. It's not necessarily like a piracy oath where we're all going to work to rob the land, but it's usually in service to something far bigger than themselves, and maybe something that even extends far past their lifetime. Yeah, yeah. Ivor's like, yeah. Oh, thank you, Christy. Thank you as well for joining on in there, young lady. Ivor says, nah, I mean, Pally's always got this trope. Yeah, boring, humorless, fanatic, goody, stubborn idiot who can't nothing versus laws, but charismatic ones. I think that's something. Yeah, the whole idea of like the being like the idiotic goodies and such is just a trope that's lasted a very long time. It's been even without role playing games, it's been overused. The Dudley do right kind of idea. The Sometimes it's even used in modern day, like the detective or police officer that is whose morality and their code of ethics is pristine, it is immutable, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been done a lot. You're so silly, Christy. Miss me? I know every bullet so far. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for remembering me as well. Now, using them in a game, of course, one absolutely easy idea is that they represent the law enforcement in the world, especially if they are considered some kind of special forces version of law enforcement, meaning in our modern day here in the States, we have things like actual military special forces. We have detectives and investigators, which are different than standard police officers. There are, of course, various special forces branches of various world militaries. There are even like SWAT and HRT, I believe it stands for hostage rescue, and hostage negotiator. Like, they could represent those special forces, and especially if the player characters are, shall we say, falling on one side of the fence versus the other side when it comes to embracing the law. These could very well be individuals, squads, groups, platoons, or something that fill out the world because of the fact that the player characters are always on the other side of the law. Yeah, Deadman says, real irony for this week. The character Ezekiel from The Walking Dead is often called King Ezekiel, and has earned and has even knighted a couple of people, and is played by a black man with dreads. Yep, yes, in The Walking Dead, and sure, maybe I'm thinking, I'm bringing up something that maybe even the television show is not. The character Ezekiel, he's got the white dreadlocks, kind of like myself. I haven't gotten fully silvered and white yet, but yes, he is often called King Ezekiel, and portrays himself as one of nobility. And when questioned about it in the show, essentially he knows he's portraying something that doesn't exist, but there's something about it that really draws people to it, that they're in service of something greater than themselves. And the fact that oftentimes perception makes reality for many of us, and for humanity in general. And so by faking it, he's making it. And yeah, yep, hostage rescue teams, yes, HRT. There's so many different special forces units of all kinds of law enforcement around the world. In many ways, knights kind of can represent that in your games. So yeah. Christy says a commander in battle, shiny metal, tin can tin can horse pack to give the commanders an icon to follow. It that absolutely follows along the idea of, say, people going into battle with banners and music, and they are the like you said, the icon, the individual, the symbol that people can follow, and almost nameless in a way, despite the fact that the person may or may not know them personally. These individuals represent people who are where someone can draw upon strength when they're scared, or hope when they feel that they're in a hopeless situation. So they don't just represent a physical force, but they also represent an emotional force. And I believe that's represented in Dungeons and Dragons by their charisma, right? It's not just them having being very gorgeous or handsome. It's not just being very conversational, but it is this idea that they represent something that means that the works that the rest of the population of the world are doing, if they follow the tenets of the knights and the knighted ones, that their life will have meaning. And that's extremely important to people. And I think oftentimes, especially amongst us players, we often underserve the idea that there is a particular reason why, say, paladins and knights and things like that have a very high charisma, and it's because they do represent something that is above them. They an example would be the idea that through the eyes of the knights and the paladins and these Templars or whoever, that they represent the eyes of a divine force. They represent the judgment of something that is beyond our world. And so, sure, you may have someone who is callous and doesn't care, and they're pickpockets and thieves, and maybe even abusers or predators of some sort. But maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice about doing such a thing simply in the presence of these individuals, for fear that, they may talk a good game, but really internally they're like, through their eyes, the gods are looking at me, so maybe I won't steal, maybe I won't kill, maybe I won't poison, someone. Yeah. Yeah. Going back into the chat over here at Twitch, Ivor says, I actually prefer to play the paladin renegade, the guy who stood away from his order. Like, he's still a good guy, but he pursues justice, not laws, like exiled vigilante or someone like this. No, absolutely. Yeah. And yes, Christy, you did see a patty cake. Yeah, that's my cat, a putty cat. Yeah, you thought you saw one, and you absolutely did. She's. If I closed the door, they would scream. I wouldn't be able to get the show done. So they sit beside me all day long. This idea that in the past, I know you guys, maybe some of you aren't old enough, but I still remember. I'm an old enough grognard that I remember times when games would break down into, you'd almost get into table flipping because the paladin, would do something that was against their oath, or that would do something that was a hair's breadth away from being perfectly lawful or good, and that means you have to lose all your lawful powers, your paladin abilities, and fights would break out, and even till today, something similar to that still happens. Not so much with oaths, as opposed to being using anything from the first through fourth edition, but it still happens, and that's our fault. That's not the fault of specifically of the game. But there is this idea that being an exiled knight or someone, you can very much have this idea where the governmental institution, the instructions, the purpose of these knighted individuals, elevated individuals, may be different than what the public wants, or even go against someone's moral code. So, for example, the classic, let's do have a war against the goblinoid armies, right? And of course the goodly people are dressed in their silvered armor, and they go up against these barbaric goblinoids. And then all of a sudden, much like World of Warcraft, or heck, the B1 Keep on the Borderlands, PCs come across the children and pregnant and you know non-combatants that belong to the goblinoid army. And then what do? And of course, there's the whole moralistic argument of, well, I'm going to kill them because the monster manual says they're chaotic evil, and they're just going to grow up to be evil. So why would I feel any guilt killing some children or pregnant women, even though they are, because they're goblinoids? And then you have the other group that's like, no, it is determinism. I mean, it is nurture over nature, and if they're given a chance to live, and we are not the gods ourselves, blah 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 blah, right? And very much so, I feel like that would be a reason why you would have a break in the ranks of, say, knights and these knighted individuals. And the danger, of course, is how powerful they would be. If you're doing something very realistic, that of course they have the highest skills, the best armor, the best weapons. They have the most support staff behind them, something that we often ignore when it comes to highly trained military organizations, that they have an extremely large amount of support staff, food, shelter, mounts, money, influence. When a very small group, let's say something like United States Navy SEALs, operates, they don't, despite the fact that they operate in small groups, they have an extremely large presence behind them, and support staff behind them. They can call in favors that more people cannot do. They usually have a greater ability to communicate and supersede other communications to perform their jobs, as well as other organizations basically being ordered to drop what they're doing to lend support to the highly trained individuals. So, for example, player characters that may not particularly like, I don't know, a squad of 6 knights and attempts to go and want to put them down might get crushed under the heel of many nations for daring to, usurp the power of, say, just a six-man group of knights. That, if word spreads that one PC, I don't know, spit on a knight, who knows what kind of repercussions would happen to them on a social level and economic level and things like that. Yeah, Ivor's like, there was some awesome 90s show, I guess you're saying, like the Exo Squad, or Visioneers, count as knights in my book. I don't remember those. I mean, I remember a bunch of 90s shows, but I don't remember that. Remember that at all. Harry says, sometimes God's path is impossible to follow, aka I'm lawful good, not lawful stupid. Exactly. Sometimes there is an ideal that a lot of these organizations have that the individual cannot achieve. And despite the fact that we are talking about knights, I suppose I could have very easily merged this with samurai. There is an extreme similarity between the two, whereas the cinematic idealized version of samurai, following an ideal, serving a greater power, acting as the law in a realm where it might be lawless, dedicating themselves even until death, having the best arms and armor, the best training. They have extreme parallels, right? And sometimes, much like Harry mentions, like sometimes a god's path is impossible to follow. So too is it. So too is it also possible that it is impossible to remain absolute in your service, especially when honor and face is matched up against the realities of things that you're following. And now, of course, many of these organizations have fallen apart over time. It could be that this might be one of the reasons why such a thing has fallen apart. Thank you, Tesla, putting the visionaries and the Exo Squad symbol in the Discord. Oh man, I see. I remember that. I don't remember the show. I would have to see some clips or something. I'm gonna definitely have to check that out. All right. Deadman says the antithesis to the paladin should be lawful evil, but D&D makes them chaotic evil. That's because in the alignment path, it is the opposite of law is chaos, and the opposite of good is evil. That's why they did it, as opposed to say lawful evil, which is someone who still follows a the lawful portion would be they follow a tradition, they follow strict rules, they obey orders given to them, but they're just doing it under, a very brutal, a very evil form of it. But yeah, absolutely. And this idea that one idea that I love is the exiled knight, the fallen paladin, but the individual doesn't lose the gifts that are given to them. Oftentimes those gifts are, when I say gifts, I'm talking about supernatural gifts. A lot of times those gifts are given to them because of their devotion, their loyalty. The Jedi, like the Jedi Knights, perfectly fit into this, fit in this regard, in that they may rebel against the strict orders that they are given. For example, if they are instructed to slaughter a village, or they are put in a catch-22 situation, or they are put in they are put in a position where there is no good choice. I will give you an example. There are 10,000 or more enemy that will storm the gates of the city-state, and the army of 1,000 knights are sent out to stop a 10 to 1 odds. And they're like, okay. But the problem is that there are a number of, let's say, outside villages. There are farmers and fishermen and textile workers and such, and they do not live inside the city, the city walls. They do not live inside the city-state. And the orders are, we cannot give away our defensive position. We want to surprise the enemy. We need to have surprise against 10 to 1 odds against this army. You cannot send out scouts to alert those villages, because if we empty out the villages and bring them within the city gates, the enemy will be prepared for us. They will know many, many dozens of miles or kilometers away from our city-state, and thus we will lose our surprise advantage. So those people, in many ways, are both decoys. They are the innocents that will be killed because our enemy is deciding to attack us. You have to stay at home, right? So the choice is it the many versus the few? Do you leave your ordered post to go save these individuals that have no idea that death is about to overrun them? Making the choice to follow the instructions of the leadership. Either choice would probably be correct, right? One person, two best friends may say, look, I'm going to stay here on the castle walls. I'm going to stay here at the city-state and protect the people that are here. We have, I don't know, I'm just making up some weird number. We've got nearly 500,000 people who live here, and their lives are extremely important. And if I leave, they will be defenseless. And then the other person's like, yeah, but we have people out there who cannot defend themselves, and I'm going to go out and save them. Both of them are correct, right? And so you have this idea where if someone leaves the paladin's order, do they lose their capabilities? Does some other force come behind them and speak in their ear and talk to them in their sleep and try to pull them to a darker side of devotion, because there's a chink in the armor, not physically but emotionally or psychologically, right? Also, the acts, much like the Templars, at least historically, maybe there are some acts that are performed by these roving bands of knights that people tolerate, but aren't necessarily nice. They come into town and steal people's food. They take over people's property, their homes, their livelihood. Maybe they leave. Maybe they come through and both thematically and officially start to rape and pillage before they leave, and the population is afraid to say anything, and the few that do say something are shut down, maybe by their own family and friends, or maybe even by they're afraid because, well, these people are given divine, they're touched by the divine, and they assume that maybe there's something wrong with them for even having the desire to complain about it. This has happened over and over throughout society, where the privileged few step on the necks of the ones below them, and it might be no different for these knighted individuals. And so the player characters, of course, maybe not having the capabilities, not having the resources behind them, maybe they rise up and want to overthrow or stop these individuals that are being used as the arm of power by someone who is in power, much like the classic story of the 47 Ronin, right? Before they became the 47 Ronin, those samurai were loyal to the daimyo, and instructed to do things that forced them to leave their posts. Christy says, like a sniper, they all see their victims' faces every time they close their eyes. One thing that often is undersold when it comes to is my character lawful good or not? Is my character doing the right thing? Am I breaking my oaths? Oftentimes is not the act. Goodness and evil is often based on how much guilt we have based on the acts that we do. In many ways, PTSD is a side effect of someone who is instructed to do very bad things and witness very evil things, but internally it runs counter to their perception of what's right and wrong. And it's not that they don't want to do the thing; they have volunteered to do the thing, but the psychological scarring is, I am in many ways sacrificing my soul to perform an act that others may not or do not or cannot do, but I will do such a thing and then suffer the consequences after. And those consequences are often psychological. Sometimes they are legal as well. Hey, I stole the bread, city guard. I stole the bread to feed my family, but I'm also willing to suffer the consequences of doing a said thing. The same thing would go for like knights in your typical fantasy game, right? Yes, I killed the goblinoid babies and pregnant orcs and bugbears and stuff, but I'm also willing to stand before a tribunal and suffer the consequences. I'm willing to atone for the things that I've done. And it's one of the few character classes that has had, at least in the past, has had atonement built into its those capabilities at the time when paladins were significantly more powerful than other character classes. They had this ability. They had built into them that they could lose their abilities and then have to atone for the things that they've done. And one great story idea might be, for one, not all things need to be equal when you look behind the curtain. So, for example, everyone that is a knight does not necessarily need to be a metagamed paladin, right? You're very much you'll have people who are fighters and rangers. Heck, you might even throw a barbarian or two in there. They don't even have to have character classes, but that's a gaming statistic. Even though they are all knights, there's very easily, let's say, for example, Lord of the Rings. Let's take Lord of the Rings, for example. Aragorn was literally a ranger, right? They called him a ranger, and very much probably was a ranger in the character class description, or maybe a fighter or something, depending on how anyone or everyone out there wants to describe it. Despite having a noble birth, and then once accepting his place in society, probably still has the ability to say knight others once he accepted the mantle of leadership and such, right? So just because people are called knights or they're given a title doesn't mean that the gaming statistics need to match those. And I say that because it's also possible that one or more individuals, the player characters, might go, wait a minute, this person is like burning people's homes and stealing their food and being rude. Why are they can't still be a paladin? And the thing might be they may have never been a paladin in the first place in the gaming sense, right? No, they haven't lost any of their capabilities because they never were. They just said they were. And that's a great way to change the interactions of how the player characters interact with those individuals in the game. I mean, very much instead of using paladins, the game master could say, "Hey guys, let's instead use arcane knights or rangers or something of that nature." Or you can play any character class that's able to wear armor, or you've picked a feat or a capability that allows you to wear full plate mail, as an example. Excuse me, but still and operate as a knight, even though you are not playing a specific gaming mechanism. Also, another strange thing, especially when it comes to storytelling, is what happens when the knighthood turns bad. Does this greater power still grant them their abilities? Do those abilities begin to change over time? I once came up with the idea of, instead of just going 0 to 60 and saying, well, if you're a player character and you break your oath or something, you have none of your abilities. You could do that very subtly based on choices that they're given. For example, you may say, okay, Paladin, for today, to pick your spells, you must pick one of the following 3 spells. Darkness, let's say Burning Hands or Flame Strike or something, or Vicious Mockery. Right? You got to pick one of those spells. And the players might be like, what? Like, just follow me on this. You got to pick one of those spells. And then maybe over time, maybe some of their capabilities start shifting and changing over to something far more insidious or evil. Also, another trope is that, unfortunately, with the lawful stupid thing, right? Knights tend to be the ones who, the loyal soldiers tend to be the ones that are given instructions to do a thing that anybody with common sense knows is a fool's errand, is a suicide mission, or something of that nature. And it's possible that the knights are sent on a mission against a rival country or a faction, or to go after particular criminals or something of that nature, in a manner in which they know they're not going to win. An example would be knights going into a dangerous part of a city where there's nothing but cutthroats. It's scum and villainy, and they're literally going door to door, knocking on doors and walking down the street, and there's shiny their shiny armor and their sharpened swords, and they're knocking on door to doors looking for criminals, right? And the first thing going in your head is like, wait a minute, why would a criminal just stand here and wait to be assailed or arrested? No, the criminals run, the innocent people stick around and get abused by the law enforcement, right? And the same thing might be here. And as a matter of fact, in our present day, the same kinds of things happen. It's much like the the overwhelmingly consistent idea of we're going to go to war against, say, terrorism. And you're going, yeah, but you can't send soldiers against people who do not follow those same orders, right? They don't appear on battlefields lined up in formations one against the other. One side might be playing with rules the other side has thrown out, and that is in both in real life and in role playing games. That could be something that's a very story driven mechanism where the knights are stomping around and trying to do their thing, and the player characters are face palming like, God, stop it! You're doing more harm than good by doing all this stuff, right? Christy brings up the Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers. Yeah, listen, there's no shortage of tropes when it comes to knights and knighthoods and loyal, expertly trained loyal soldiers that are out there in the wild. I suppose there are, if you wanted to go, say, Wild West, the idea of the sheriff, the marshal, the bounty hunter kind of fits into the same kind of trope. The science fiction version of this exists. The Galaxy Rangers kind of thing fits into that trope. But if we want to zoom out a little bit, oftentimes I feel like the contention between player characters and game masters when it comes to being part of or resisting a knight's order is that one represents upholding the status quo, the other is throwing out order and going for more chaos, more individuality. Very much like samurai and knights, they are in support of a system that in their mindset, their service supports the system that is in place. And so if that system is viewed as something that is lawful and just and good and worthy, it makes a lot of sense to follow it. If you play the game Legend of the Five Rings, it very much has to deal with a fictionalized version of serving, being a samurai and serving in an order. There's also being a knight. If the support of the law, the nobility, the divinity is one that is creeping far more towards evil, repressive, dictatorial, then of course they represent the hand of, they serve the very order that's bringing people down. And so I can see why player characters might be resistant to want to play in a group like that, where it's like, well, yeah, we're serving an order, but we really don't have very much to do. Also, the stereotype of playing characters that are knights. By the way, there are plenty of role-playing games whose only focus is to play a knight. The first thing that comes to my mind is, I think it's called Pendragon. It might have a longer name, but it's completely devoted, and you're always trying to balance your loyalty, your devotion, your expertise. It's always this thing where you're always trying to stay in balance, but there's always a problem trying to do it. The classic King Arthur and King Arthur's Round Table is a good example of a group of individuals there where there's even internal strife amongst their own when pursuing something that is the cinematic version of King Arthur, and one King Arthur not being above his own men and serving the community, and of course there's strife when it comes to adultery and having, looking for, there it is, the Pendragon, the role playing game. It is a role playing game about performing chivalric deeds and things like that. Yeah, Pendragon, or King Arthur Pendragon, is a role playing game in which players take the role of knights performing chivalric deeds in the tradition of Arthurian legend. It was originally written by Greg Stafford and published by Chaosium, then acquired by Green Knight. Yeah, and it seems like there's not very much story when it comes to playing knights. Oh, we're all in armor, we have all got weapons, we just follow instructions, and that's it. But I think the story is given instructions that you can't perform. Um, Having an oath which has an impossibility to serve, and I don't mean automatic punishment. That's the wrong thing to do. It's very much like being a samurai, that your honor and your loyalty, those two come into conflict all the time. And so which side of that do losing face, do you follow your own internal code? Do you follow the external code, sacrificing your own dignity? Do you, after making a choice one way or the other, how do you feel about doing it? Do you feel guilty about it? Do you want to compensate the people that you harmed, despite the fact you were instructed to do a thing? Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you, Dead Man. Yeah. Yep. Green Knight Publishing passed the rights on the White Wolf in 2004, and then sold the game to Stuart Wick in 2009, and then Wick formed Nocturnal Media, since been updated and reissued the fifth edition originally published by White Wolf. Wow, that's served a lot of masters over time. Kind of fits into what, kind of in a meta way, talking about what we're talking about, where maybe maybe the characters are loyal to the crown, but the crown has changed hands multiple times, or there's contention as to who has the crown. This has happened in our own life. George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire, he admitted in large part was pulled against the War of Roses, in which the bloodlines, who was to take over when those in power passed away, was not dictated, and so you had a lot of people fighting for the throne, whether it is whether it passes on from male heir to other male heir and or sibling, whether if this is a extremely gender biased, a patriarchal society, maybe the women want to say, hey, this is my opportunity to seize power. There are others who are not related to the bloodline, who are from the outside, and say, hey, no heir has been chosen, but I am the next in power because I have the most power. Someone may say, this land used to be mine and it was stolen from my family, and since this is the opportunity to seize power again. And so the player characters might be put in a position where, who do I serve? I may not be serving anyone, and the ones who are in power are very blatantly serving their own desires. Play by Jay says, gosh, I hope the books finish differently than the series did. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone hopes that for Song of Ice and Fire. Although, a somewhat running joke is that George R. R. Martin intended it to end the way the show did, and saw how the show ended, and is like, ooh, I better go back to the drawing board and rewrite it. Yeah, I never had a problem with how the show ended. I just felt like they did it. they didn't execute it correctly. The that's my particular opinion. I didn't care how it ended. I just felt like I was like they could have added like three more episodes to this to just like stretch it out a little bit so it ran a little bit more sense. But there were some things in it that some images in it that I didn't like. Brienne is one of my favorite characters, and I didn't like the way she ended her story. But whatever. Yep, I'm with you there. It was very rushed. Um, I've heard that too. They wanted to jump to Star Wars and hurry it up. Yeah, and it happens. Those things happen. It's out of our hands. I still think it's. I still refer to it. I'm butthurt or not. It's still one of the greatest television series ever created. So you can't judge it on that. Got squirreled there a little bit. So again, since we are heading towards the end, this the idea that bringing it up again. Thank you very much, dead man. Please, those of you out there, if you want to enjoy long form, unscripted content on this channel, I am here along with the very many people who make me look that much better on this channel, RPG with DBJ. 1 hour each day, Monday through Friday. Friday is reserved for, Future Friday is reserved for transhumanist elements in tabletop role-playing games, so it may not exactly fit into this theme, but just the same. Yep. And of course, you can join the rest of us in the boiler room over on the Discord chat and voice server. Now, just to end this off, please do not limit yourself to just because outwardly something looks very staid and very stereotypical, that you don't limit yourself to making them very stereotypical. Again, the idea that you could have a game where you say, hey guys, we are all playing knights in service to the crown. Make up any character you want that fits into that mold, be it a fighter or even a barbarian or a warlock or a cleric or something like that. Yeah, allow them to do that. Don't say, hey, you all have to play paladins. And maybe that's a little bit too much of a limitation. I think bards would fit perfectly well, and I even think rogues would fit. There's nothing that says that the armor could be very ceremonial in its outlook when on the battlefield, but when just patrolling around, maybe some characters prefer to just wear a breastplate and their very fine silk shirt and pantaloons or something like that. Relaxing on the plate mail longsword lance kind of thing, I think really fits in there as well. Yeah. Yeah, warlocks represent yo. um, Chaotic evil orc wizard as a crown knight. Not sure where you're going with that. I don't know if I would allow I don't think a person playing a chaotic evil character in a group of knights fits very well. But I think many of the other alignments can fit in, even if temporary. Makes perfect sense for somebody to be in a so-called lawful and good order, to be neutral good or lawful neutral, or even even neutral evil if they're selfish because they want it to be knighted because it gives them a lot of privileges and things like that. Yeah, hell yeah. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. I don't want to burn us out here. I do want to let you know that each day, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, EDT, a UTC code -4, so on and so forth. These things happen here on this channel. And you, of course, I read all comments, so even after the show has aired, and there are probably well over 600 to 800 hours of content on YouTube, as well as the show being, of course, you see the symbols, there over on Twitch as well. So, guys, thank you very much for supporting the channel and supporting me. I often don't say this, and I don't know why I don't, but I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. I myself have produced about 8 books for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, all centered around the cinematic environs, and will continue to do so. So, along with being a talking head, I am also a content creator. So you can go over to, Drive Through RPG and check Critical Hit Publishing out there as well. So, guys, everyone, have a great day. I have to head off to work. Also, everyone, be safe out there. I hope you are not going stir crazy. Depending on the rules and restrictions in your own countries, please abide by them and try not to let these things bring you down. Just remember that those of us in this role-playing realm, this tabletop RPG community, we know in a fictionalized sense that there are people that have gone through things far worse than ourselves. I think we can tolerate this. I understand that many people are not getting any resources into them, money specifically, food, worried about being able to pay their rent and such. And so while some communities, they are alleviating that threat, there are other places that are ignoring the threats to their utilities and things. So if you can help out your loved ones, heck, even help out a stranger or something of that nature. So guys, thank you very much. I will be in the Discord for a couple of moments when this is over. I want you guys to have a great day. Please just be careful out there. And by the way, of course, you may absolutely join in tomorrow as well for Discord Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, Third Pillar of Exploration Thursday, and of course, Future Friday. Guys, have a great one. I'll see you later. Bye.